All right, perfect timing. Good morning, gang. Happy Monday morning. Great job on being here, starting your week off the right way with Morning Ascent. So the first thing that I want you to do is just pay attention, just whatever distractions are going on, and just let's get engaged for the next 20 minutes or so. Or what do we have left? To the bottom of the hour. I want you to write something down. I want you to write this down. Write down that everyone is challenged. Write that down. Everyone is challenged. What I believe, what I know, what my experience in my life tells me is that everybody's challenged. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. The fact is, everybody at some point in their life is challenged. I want you to think about the people that you know, whether family or friends, or maybe clients you're working with. But this next statement is true, that of the people you know, somebody is currently entering into the most difficult stage of their life, or they're in the middle of it, or they're just exiting one of the most difficult periods of their life. And in fact, that may be you. It may not be just a friend or a family member. You yourself may be going through one of those situations, just entering one of the most difficult periods of your life. You're in it currently, or you're just coming out of it. See, the truth is that life is a challenge. And here's the thing, and I want you to just think about this. We've all heard this statement, but it's so true. Bad things happen to good people. When you think about all the challenges that you faced, the challenges you didn't want, the quote unquote bad things that happened, right? Bad things happen to good people. It's not a question of whether there's going to be challenge. That's not the issue. The real issue is, how are we going to respond? See, I believe that there are keys to success. If you take a look at people who are successful, they're successful not because bad things haven't happened to them. It's not because life has been easy for them. In fact, what I would suggest, what I would argue, what I would in fact bet and guarantee on is this, that those who are highly successful have faced more challenge than most. I want you to think about that. Those who are highly successful have faced more challenge than most. See, the question isn't whether there's going to be challenge. The question is, are we going to be willing to face the challenge? Are we going to be willing not only to face the challenges that life throws at us, but are we going to be willing to create more challenge? That's a really important question. See, the average person does whatever they can in life as they go through this journey to try to avoid challenge. They want to take the easy road, make things as easy as possible. Avoid the fear, avoid the rejection, avoid the disappointment. Take the road that's most traveled as opposed to the road that's less traveled by. That's what the average person does. See, but I believe that bad things happen to good people. I'll give you a really good example of this. I've used this example before, but it exemplifies this. It really is, it gets to the essence of this whole concept. The two young boys who are being raised by an abusive drunk father. The father's horrible. He abuses them mentally, physically, emotionally, because he has an addiction. He subjects these boys to terror every single day as he gets drunk and acts out as a drunk. And as the years go by, these boys, of course, they respond to this circumstance, the best that they can, doing what they know to do, to just simply try to survive, to try to get through it. And as they become adults and they go on and live their lives, they're both interviewed by a reporter who is doing research on what it's like to grow up with an alcoholic in the home. And the reporter asks one brother, who ended up becoming a doctor. And he asked the doctor, he said, so you grew up in a household where your father was abusive? And he said, yes, my dad was exceptionally abusive. He was a drunk. He would get drunk. He was an angry, mean drunk. And the reporter said, well, I find it fascinating that you grew up in that household, in that sort of environment, day in and day out for 18 years. And here you are, a very successful medical doctor, one of the best in your field. And you have a family, and life seems to be good. And the journalist's question was, how is that possible? And the doctor looked at him with absolute sincerity, but with candor, and as if it's just to say, well, isn't the answer obvious? The answer is because I grew up in a household where my father was a drunk. So see, the man chose to do the opposite of the example of his father. The second son was asked the same question. Now, this man was in and out of rehab, had a hard time keeping a job and keeping a relationship. That was his life. He would cycle through those things, through relationships, through being in jail, through addiction. And he was asked the same question. How is it that you ended up this way? And his response is, well, what would you expect? My father was a drunk. See, they both grew up in the same set of circumstances, and yet two completely different, diametrically opposed outcomes, not even close to the same. The same set of circumstances, the same household, the same father, and yet two different outcomes. What is that about? Well, I believe it's about our response. There are three things I want to talk about this morning that I believe that if we pay attention to these things, that it doesn't matter the challenges that life throws at us. And as long as we're alive, life will throw challenges at us. Let's admit that. There are three things that I want to just discuss with you here this morning. And the first one is this, and please write this one down. It's commitment. Commitment. And as you write that down, the word commitment, I want you to think about this. Commitment is really about what we focus on. Commitment is about what we focus on. So next to the word commitment, write that down. Commitment is what we focus on. It's what we've decided consciously to focus on. So the question I would ask you is, what have you consciously decided to focus on in your journey on life, in your journey in this business of real estate? Maybe even this morning when you got up, what was the first thing that you were thinking about? What were you focused on? What was your brain subconsciously committed to? What was it consciously committed to? I want to share with you a fun story about this idea of commitment and what we focus on. So several years ago, I was at a swim meet with my daughter, Gabrielle, who eventually became the swim team captain. And I'm not certain at this time she was the swim team captain. I don't think she was. I think this was her junior year. And she became the swim team captain in her senior year. But I was at a swim meet with her. And by the way, I always like to share this. If a doctor came to me, and all of you parents who have kids or grandkids who have been or are on swim teams, you relate to this. That if my doctor came to me and said, John, I'm sorry, but you are dying of a terminal illness, what would be my next step? My next step would be to go to a swim meet. And the question is why? Well, because swim meets last forever. So I want my last day to last forever. They go on and they go on and they go on. Swim meets do. But I'm at this particular swim meet with my daughter, and we're standing there talking, and she's waiting for her heat to start. And she keeps checking the board to make certain that she doesn't miss her call. And we're standing there talking, and the next thing we know, the buzzer goes off, and she sees all of the people for her heat jumping into the pool. Well, obviously a miscalculation. She was looking at the board and then talking to me, and for whatever reason, missed the fact that it was her group that was on the blocks ready to swim. And it took about 3 to 4 seconds before she realized that it was her heat and that she had to get on the block and then had to jump in the water. It was 3 to 4 seconds that elapsed from the time that all of that occurred, which meant that she was 3 to 4 seconds behind the last person in the heat. And what is interesting is I watched her over the next couple of minutes strive to at least just finish with some honor and some dignity. I could see it. I mean, she was working really hard to make that happen. And what was interesting is that as time progressed and I watched her swim and I watched the other kids swim, right? The other girls swim, she started to gain. She started to pass people. She passed the last person, the second to the last person, the third to the last, or the fourth to the last. She started passing all of these kids. And what is interesting is in just the final seconds, she was neck and neck with the person who took first place. I mean, she was just within a fraction of a second of being in first place. Now, unfortunately, she didn't win. But when she got to the end of the pool, she touched the edge of the pool. She come up out of the water and she looks at the board to see her time and see where she placed. And she was feeling really good about herself, and she should have. Because the fact is, she was down by 3-4 seconds, and yet she took second place. It was phenomenal. I was so impressed with her. I was so excited for her. And so is she. And as she came out of the water and we were celebrating and we were talking, about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds at the most later, an official walks up and hands her this little slip, a pink slip. Now, she'd never been handed one of these, and I'd never seen this before, so I didn't know what it was. She opened it up and she read it, and it was a DQ slip, a disqualification slip. She was disqualified because she was not on the block with her heat when the buzzer went off. And if you're not on the block when the buzzer goes off, you're automatically disqualified. Well, of course, she was very upset. She started to cry. She felt so bad. She felt bad. She felt embarrassed. She felt bad because all of that effort she felt like was for naught. And I looked at her and I said, Gabrielle, I have to tell you something. I am so proud of you. I know that this is difficult. I know this is painful. I said, but you've accomplished something here that's much greater than a win, or getting second place in your heat. I said, this for me exemplifies that you get that commitment is exceptionally important. Because the fact is, 3 to 4 seconds behind to expect that you're going to place and place well would be, for some, would be ridiculous. That why would you even do it? And yet she committed to jumping in the water and giving it her all. See, gang, my question for you is, what are you committed to? What are you committed to? See, your commitments are ultimately what you focus on. What are you focused on? Are you focused on winning? Are you focused on finishing? Are you focused on the challenges? Are you focused on excuses? Are you focused on all the reasons why it won't work? It isn't going to work. It's not possible. Because see, Gabrielle could have done that. Well, it's not possible. I can't win. I'm behind. Might as well not even try. See, our commitments are what we focus on, what we decide to focus on mentally, physically, and emotionally. But here's the key. Our commitments aren't what we say they are. They're ultimately what we do. So I go back to my question again. What are your commitments? What are you focused on? What are the actions that you're taking consistently every single day? See, if you're going to get through life, through the challenges that it presents to you, the challenges that this business presents to you, man, you're going to be careful about what you focus on, what you are ultimately committed to. So I'll just leave you with this as it relates to this particular point, commitment. What are you committed to? In other words, what daily actions are you taking? Because ultimately, our commitments aren't what we say they are, rather they're what we do. So look at what you're doing on a daily basis consistently. Be honest with yourself. And if your activities consistently are exactly what they need to be to achieve the life that you want, then congratulations. You're responsible for that. That is your responsibility. And you can take credit for it. If you look at it and say, well, my daily commitments, the things that I do on a daily basis are not consistent with the things that I say that I want, then what I would say to you is congratulations. You own that. You're responsible for that. And why do I say congratulations? Because what they say is the first step to recovery is admission. Admit it. Admit that your daily activities are not consistent with the things that you say that you want or the things that you say that you're committed to. Remember, life gets a whole lot easier and you'll achieve a lot more if you remain committed to the process. Be committed to doing the right things to get the outcomes that you want. Realizing that bad things happen to good people. So what are you going to focus on? Because everybody is challenged. Everybody. Don't use your challenges as an excuse to play a victim and say, yeah, but other people don't and aren't faced with this. Because the fact is, there are people who have challenges that are much greater than yours, and that is a fact. It isn't a question of whether there's going to be challenge. The question is, how are you going to respond to it? What are you going to focus on? What are you going to remain committed to as you go through this crazy journey in this business and in life? The second thing is this, that's key, that's critical to your success. It's patience. So write down the word patience. Gang, the world has changed so much since I was a kid. I can't believe it to say that I'm going to be 52 years old this year. The world is different today than it was when I was a kid. I remember having a conversation with my grandmother. Loved and adored my grandma. A very classy lady, but a very strict lady, very hard-nosed lady. Very elegant lady. But I remember having conversations with her, and I remember her sharing with me what it was like growing up on a ranch. She grew up on a ranch in Wyoming. They had no electricity. They used gas for lights or candles. At one point, they didn't have running plumbing. Eventually, they got it, but their running plumbing was an outhouse, about 25 yards away from the house. They didn't have an electric stove. Her mother prepared meals and an old, like, potbelly stove that had a cooktop on it, and they would have to fire that thing up with wood. They didn't have coal; they used wood. And I remember her explaining to me what it took to actually prepare a meal. Because being in Wyoming, in Lost Spring, Wyoming, in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere, there was nothing around for hundreds of miles. There was no grocery store to go to. There was no restaurant to go to. That every meal that you ate, you prepared. And I remember her talking to me about what it took to prepare a dinner. She talked about if it was going to be chicken for dinner that day, that her mom would have her go out in the morning to the hen house, find a chicken and wring its neck, which basically meant grab the chicken by the neck and swing it around, break its neck. Sorry for being so graphic for some of you, but that's the way it's done. She would wring the chicken's neck, and then she would pluck the feathers from the chicken and then bring that into her mom. And then her mom, my great grandmother, would then prepare the chicken. She would clean it, quarter it, do all the things that you do to prepare chicken, to fry it or whatever they were going to do with it. And all the while, my great grandmother would have to stoke up the stove and then prepare all of the other ingredients that she was going to match with the chicken. Well, that entire process literally would take all day with the tasks that my grandmother had to do. I mean, it would take all day to do that. And I want you to think about that. You and I, when we want to have a chicken, whether it's fried or it's roasted or whatever, all we have to do is go to the local grocery store or the local fast food restaurant. I mean, we've gotten so used to getting food so quickly that we've pressured our grocery stores. Because when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old, you couldn't go to the grocery store and get a rotisserie chicken. But our penchant for, our need for, our desire for, our demand for chicken on demand, hot chicken, got our grocery stores into the business of providing hot chicken. So now you can go in and there's a hot chicken for you right there in a display. In other words, the grocery stores are now competing with KFC and Popeyes. We've gotten so impatient that we want things now. And look, gang, I get it. Life is very busy, right? And it's much easier to go to Ralph's or to Albertsons, right? Or Harmon's, and just simply buy a hot chicken prepared by somebody else. But here's the thing. Whether we're talking about our food or our mail. I mean, gang, when I was a kid, mail looked something like this. You would write a letter, then you would put it in an envelope, you would address the envelope, you would lick a stamp, you would put it on the envelope, and then you would take it to the mailbox. You would, in my case, down to the post office. We didn't have a mailbox at the house. You'd have to go to the post office. And then it would be mailed, and then it would arrive, a week, 2 weeks later to the destination. And then the party you mailed to would have to go through the same process. So it could take weeks or a month or more for correspondence to occur. And now today in our world, we have the ability not only to email, that's really yesterday. Now we will text people. We communicate just like that. What's happened is we've trained ourselves, given technology and the direction things are going, is to be impatient. Impatient. My question for you is, are you being patient or are you being impatient? Look at it. When I was a kid, Sears, the best and quickest way to get something from Sears, especially when you lived in the middle of nowhere like I did, would be to go through the catalog, select what you wanted, fill out the form, and mail it. Go through that process of mailing something. And a couple months later, they would send you the product. And now today, that process looks like this. You get on your computer, you get on your smartphone, on Amazon, you select what you want, and if you order it today, it's here tomorrow at the latest. Crazy. We have been programmed, socialized to expect things when? Now. Again, I'm here to tell you the success doesn't come now. It requires patience. It requires patience. When I was a kid, if you wanted information other than what you would see on the news, if you wanted to read about it, you had to go to an encyclopedia. Well, those encyclopedias, best case scenario, were several months old, if not years old. And what they would do to keep them up to date is every year they would send an updated version that contained new information on the topics that they had discussed in the previous versions. And you would have to update it using those little reference stickers to place on the old article that would then reference you to the new article in the newest book that they would publish on an annual basis. So that was considered up to date. Today, if you want up-to-date information, you want to read up-to-date information, you simply open up your iPhone and you read up-to-date information. That's not a year old, that's not 6 months old, that's not a month old, that's not even a week old or even a day old. It's a matter of minutes or seconds old. We have become programmed to expect things now. And it's to our detriment because the fact is success doesn't come now. It requires patience. So I have a couple of questions for you. Where in your life are you patient? Let me repeat that. Where in your life are you patient? Because what I know is that there are certain areas of your life where you are patient. And my suspicion is this. I want you to think about this. In that area of life where you are patient, I guarantee you that things are going well in that arena of your life. Patience leads to great outcomes. So then it leads to this question. Where in your life do you need to be more patient? Think about in your life where you need to demonstrate more patience. And my suspicion is in that area of life where you say that you need to be more patient, there is room for improvement or massive room for improvement. The good news is this, gang, is that if you'll admit that, if you'll admit the area of your life where you need to demonstrate and exercise more patience, they say that that's the first step to recovery is admission. So if you'll admit that, you're well on your way to recovering, to improving your circumstances so that you can become more patient. Because the fact is that success does not happen overnight. It's not like winning the lottery. One of the most offensive things that you could say to anybody who is successful is, gosh, you're so lucky. It just seems like it it happened overnight. No, it didn't happen overnight. It takes years to be successful at anything. And the challenge is that most people don't want to admit that, or they're socialized to think that that's not necessary. And therefore, when they go down the journey, they face the challenges, they do the things that are necessary to be successful, and they don't get the results immediately. They simply give up on the process. And they bounce around from commitment to commitment to commitment, never having achieved anything of significance because they don't get the results they want in the short time that they expect. And they think that they are the exception and it doesn't work for them because, and then they come up with this story as to why. And they point the finger of blame at everything and everyone but themselves because they failed to be patient with the process. And then number 3, gang, write this down. The third thing that's absolutely necessary if you're going to be successful in this business and in life is you have to believe. It is not an option. So write down the word believe, underline it, circle it, exclamation points, asterisks next to it. Belief is absolutely necessary. You know, one of my favorite examples that exemplifies patience is the work of Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison in his lifetime was successful enough and so patient at what he did, and such a brilliant mind, that he applied for and received over 3,000 patents for over 3,000 different products or ideas. Think about that, 3,000. I'm not aware of anybody historically as an individual who applied for and received more patents than Thomas Edison. An amazing, amazing, amazing individual. Thomas Edison exemplifies the idea of belief. Okay, and here's what is interesting. We take it for granted. You know, we go into a room and flip on a switch and voila, there is light. Well, back in the day, that wasn't the case. As I mentioned in my grandmother's day, it was candlelight or gas lamp. Well, Thomas Edison believed that it was possible to use electricity, and what he theorized, this thing called a bulb or a light bulb, could be used to create light. And so he was dedicated to that idea. He was dedicated to the extent that he invented over 3,000 versions of a light bulb before he found one that worked commercially, that would work, that would be viable. 3,000. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in the process? Do you believe in your ability to the extent that you would try something 3,000 times over the course of months and years before it actually worked and stick to it? Think about the level of belief it requires to do something like that. And here's where it gets even crazier. 3,000 versions of the bulb before he found one that worked. And when he found one that worked, then he had to work on the filament, that piece of carbon in the bulb that burns, that actually glows, the thing that actually, as the electricity goes through it, it heats it up and it burns and it glows. It's called a filament. He had to test 6,000 different plants because it's carbon. So 6,000 different plants to find the one that was viable, that would work, that would burn long enough, that would last so that the bulb would actually be effective. So not only did he spend months and years creating 3,000 different versions of the bulb, but then he had to spend countless hours just focused on that one little element, the filament. 6,000 plants he had to test to ensure that he had a bulb that was actually going to work. Talk about belief. Talk about blow your mind commitment to believing that it's going to work out. Look, gang, the pessimist would say that no one knows enough to be an optimist. You know, I hear people all the time complain. It's not going to work. Can't happen. Never happens for me. I'm not lucky. Nothing good has ever happened to me, right? I hear people complain. I hear pessimists all the time complain. And pessimists would say, no one knows enough to be an optimist. How can you be optimistic? Because you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know that it's going to work out. People fail all the time. In fact, Most people do. You look at the extraordinary or the ordinary person, the average person, they're not living their dreams. 75% of people go to work at a job they hate. So the pessimist would say, no one knows enough to be an optimist. Well, that may be true. May be true, gang. But the fact is that no one knows enough to be a pessimist either. See, if you don't know enough to be an optimist, but you certainly don't know enough to be a pessimist. Because if the first statement is true, that no one knows enough to be an optimist, then the second statement is true, that no one knows enough to be a pessimist. They're both equally true. So then, John, what's your point? Well, my point is this. It is simply a decision as to which one you're going to believe in, which one you're going to focus on. See, I believe that I do know enough to be an optimist because I choose to, number one, as we talked about in the beginning, to be committed to the right things, to focus on the right things, and to believe that if I do those things consistently over time, that it will work out, that it will. I know that it will work out. I believe that it will. And as a result, more often than not, that it actually does. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't challenge, because there always is. And have I failed? You all know my story. I failed over and over again. 9th grade English, failed out of law school, failed in real estate my first 4 years, ended up having everything packed into my car, lost everything in 2009, went broke. So have I faced challenges? Yes, I have. And yet, by being persistent, gang, you can overcome. Remember, be committed, and your commitments aren't what you say they are, they're what you do. Be patient, because success is not a happy meal. It takes time. And number 3, believe, because if you don't have belief, then you have nothing. The fact is that if you believe you can't, then you can't. And if you believe you can, you will. All of these things are simply a choice. It's a choice as to ultimately what we're going to focus on. It is about focus. And gang, you're all capable of achieving whatever it is that you say that you want, but you can't ignore the rules of success. So embrace them, become them, immerse yourself in the process. Take the journey. Be patient and believe in the outcome and live your best life. All right, gang, let's finish it up.